June 6, 1944, D-Day. While Allied boots hit the beaches of Normandy, high above the English Channel, the 8th Air Force was already in full roar. Imagine thousands of U.S. heavy bombers slicing through the clouds, unleashing thunderous bombing raids deep into enemy territory, smashing German strongpoints, artillery batteries, and vital rail lines. Their mission: cripple the Wehrmacht's defenses, break their spirit, and make sure no counterattack could push the Allies back into the sea. Stay tuned, because today we're diving into how these Sky Titans helped pave the way for history's greatest invasion. The mission assigned the 8th Fighter Command for D-Day under overall plan for air operations was threefold: to provide indirect fighter support for British and American bombers and airborne forces operating throughout the day in the vicinity of the assault area, to prevent or delay all types of enemy movement to or toward the assault area, this assignment to be accomplished by the attack of both mobile transportation and fixed installations. The general area assigned for these attacks was bounded as follows: on the south by the Loire River, on the north by a line Granville-Villefloz-Argenteuil-Paris, and on the east by a line Paris-Orleans. The following target priority was prescribed: to furnish its 4 P-38 groups for the protection of Allied shipping throughout the day. There were to be 3 periods during D-Day when bombers or airborne forces would operate: in the early morning, during midday, and in the evening. Full house for the morning missions. Stud for the midday missions. Royal flush for the evening missions. The planned full house was for the indirect support of RAF night bombers, airborne forces of the 9th Troop Carrier Command and the RAF Troop Carrier Command, 8th Air Force Heavy and 9th Air Force Medium bombers, all operating against target in the assault area. The 8th Fighter Command was expected to furnish support from morning civil twilight -30 minutes, for 25 a.m. until the withdrawal of the force at approximately 10 a.m. The plan provided for constant patrol of 14 designated areas so located as to form a screen around the perimeter of the Allied assault area and the cross-channel approach and withdrawal routes of the Allied air forces. The plan stud to be executed immediately after the completion of planned full house was primarily designed to further the 8th Fighter Command's role of preventing or delaying enemy movement to and towards the assault area. It detailed 37 squadrons to fighter-bomber attacks on targets of opportunity in 15 designated areas at times from 10:45 a.m. to 15:30 p.m., each squadron to operate in its assigned area for 60 minutes. 8 aircraft within each squadron were to execute bombing attacks while the remainder furnished top cover. This plan also enabled the fighters to provide indirect support for heavy bombers of the 8th Air Force, which would be attacking targets in Cannes at 13:30 p.m. The planned Royal Flush was to provide indirect fighter support for airborne forces from approximately 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. This plan provided for offensive patrols in designated areas on the perimeter of the assault area by 9 2-squadron P-47 and P-51 groups. Group and squadron leaders were to deploy their units for both the interception of enemy aircraft in the air and the attack of ground targets. In addition to the area patrols, 2 P-47 groups were to operate on Type 16, ground, control in the vicinity of Rouen and Beauvais. All P-47 groups were to remain on patrol from 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m., all P-51 groups from 7:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Also, the 4 P-38 groups of the command were committed from 4 p.m. on D-1 day until relieved to furnish fighter cover for Allied shipping during daylight hours. Commencing with D-Day patrols were to be maintained constantly from 4:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. Very little enemy air opposition was encountered, no engagements occurred during morning missions, and claims against enemy aircraft in the air, 24 destroyed and 8 damaged, were correspondingly low. Of these claims, 15 destroyed and 6 damaged resulted from attacks on a formation of Ju-88s near the assault area. Additional claims of 4 destroyed and 6 damaged, based on attacks on enemy airfields, gave a total of 28 destroyed and 14 damaged. The 5 losses were attributed to enemy aircraft. in support of the assault against the beachhead 8th Air Force was required to attack enemy batteries, strongpoints and other coastal installations on the French coastline on the Bay of the Seine between the estuaries of the rivers Orne and Vire. There were 45 targets in this coastal strip, which included 4 of the 5 assault beaches: Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. 9th Air Force medium bombers were detailed to the 5th Beach, Utah. Under Field Order 727, the 446th Group was to lead the 2nd Division and the 8th Air Force over the invasion coast. Colonel Brager in Red Ass in Flixton Airfield was first to take off before 2 a.m. and, following a lengthy assembly, led the formations to hit the Normandy beach defenses at H-5, 5 to 6, on that fateful day. This was the first of 4 missions flown that day by the 20th Combat Wing and the 8th Air Force in support of the landings. 1,361 heavy bombers were dispatched on this operation, 1,206 bombers against the beach installations in immediate support of the landing operations, and 155 bombers in a second wave against choke points in the town of Cannes. Takeoff times range from 1:55 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. The pre-dawn assembly, which involved the forming of 225 flights of 6 aircraft each, was eminently successful, with all flights executing the prescribed assembly except 3 which did not make contact with the H-2X leader. In climbing through the overcast, a number of aircraft became separated from their units, but they were able to form on other flights. Departing the English coast, the units adopted the 6 squadron abreast formations behind the designated H-2X Pathfinder aircraft. On the flight across the channel, wind velocity varied slightly to cause several units to reach the beach line a few minutes ahead of schedule, but the flight plans were closely followed on both the penetration and the withdrawal. Cloud covered the target areas, necessitating the use of through the overcast bombing technique. This was carried out according to plan. Of 1,361 heavy bombers dispatched, 1083 attacked, releasing more than 2,900 tons of bombs. On the beach installations, 1,015 of the 1,198 bombers dispatched attacked assigned targets. At Cannes, 47 of the 163 aircraft dispatched carried out their attacks as planned. In addition, of bombers dispatched in the various forces, 21 attacked alternative targets. The principal reasons for the failure of units to attack as planned were the inability to locate the H-2X leaders, poor definition on the Pathfinder scope, and absence of Pathfinder aircraft, as in the case of the 3rd Bomb Division units assigned to the Cannes targets. On the whole, the bombing runs were well executed and all attacks were well within the allotted periods. Following the first operation's immediate support of the landing, the bombing after the assault on D-Day schedule became effective with the objective of delaying the day movement of enemy reserves. The initial effort under this phase was allotted to the surplus bombers, approximately 500 bombers. 528 heavy bombers were dispatched on this mission. Assemblies were accomplished without difficulty and flights to and from the target areas were substantially as planned. Cloud of 10 out of 10 density covered all primary and secondary target areas, and with the exception of 3 groups of the 3rd Bomb Division attacked Argentan secondary target, on the signals of the single H-2X Pathfinder which participated in the mission, bombs were returned to base. The inability to attack the important communication center of Cannes and the planned strength during the 2 earlier operations due to cloud conditions led to the decision to dispatch a 3rd mission. Fighter support of an indirect type was to be provided by 7 P-51 squadrons, which would be flying offensive patrols generally south, southeast, and east of the target area. 73 B-24s were dispatched on this mission in 6 squadron formation, each with a GH Pathfinder in the lead. Generally overcast conditions prevailed over the target area and, with the exception of 1 squadron which failed to bomb due to an equipment failure in the GH lead ship, the releases were made on indications of the special equipment. On the first run over the target, the ground station was not turned on, and so a second run was necessary. The 56 aircraft which attacked dropped 155.75 tons high explosive. There were no losses in the course of this operation. The planned bombing after the assault on D-Day continued in effect, with AEAF designating the specific targets on the basis of tactical considerations. Transportation choke points in towns immediately south and east of the assault area were assigned for attack in this late evening operation. The fighter support also pattern of the earlier missions. Indirect support from 4 squadrons of P-47s and 14 squadrons of P-51s, which were to operate in specified sectors to the south and cast of the target areas, was considered adequate. A total of 736 heavy bombers were dispatched on this mission. Assemblies were made with difficulty due to clouds, which forced a large percentage of the units to assemble at 23,000 to 24,000 feet, considerably higher than planned. This resulted in a number of bombers joining groups other than those to which they were assigned, and 2 units abandoned the mission before leaving the English coast. Some units were able to make visual attacks, but others whose lead units had become inoperative were forced to seek alternative targets and, in some instances, return their bombs. A total of 553 aircraft dropped 1,568.5 tons high explosive, 116 of those aircraft releasing on alternative targets. No bombers were lost from this operation. And there you have it. On D-Day, the might of the 8th Air Force roared in from above, shattering German defenses, crippling vital supply lines, and paving the way for the Allied beachheads to hold. Their thunderous raids weren't just bombs falling from the sky, they were the sky titans that turned the tide of history. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button, subscribe for more epic World War II stories, and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Drop a comment below. What surprised you most about the air war over Normandy? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.